Death of Jehu. In those days, the Lord began to divide off parts of Israel. All along the border of Israel, Hazael defeated them from the Jordan River eastward. All the land of Gilead, of the Gadites, that of Gad, and that of Reuben, and of Manasseh, from Arir, which is on the bank of the brook of Arnon, and Gilead, and Bashan. Now, the rest of the acts Jehu, all he did, all the wars he engaged in, and the alliances he formed, are these not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? So Jehu rested with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria. Then Jehoahaz, his son, ruled in his place. And the period that Jehu reigned over Israel in Samaria was 28 years. Athaliah is the queen of Judah. Athaliah is the mother of Ahaziah. Saw her sons were dead, and that she had destroyed all the seed of the kingdom. But Jehoshaphat, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, kidnapped Joash, her brother's son, and kept him from being among the murdered sons of the king. She hid Joash and his nurse in the secret room by the bed. In this way, he was safe from Athaliah and was not killed. Thus, while Athaliah reigned over the land, he remained hidden with her in the house of the Lord. In the 7th year, Jehoiada, the priest, sent for the captains of hundreds, both Chori and Rasim, and had them brought to him in the house of the Lord. After he made a covenant with them, a binding oath in the house of the Lord, Jehoiada showed them the son of the king. Then he commanded them, saying, "This is what you shall do. When the Sabbath comes, 1/3 of you shall keep guard over the house of the king by the gate, and 1/3 by the gate of the roads, and 1/3 by the gate behind the escorts. You shall keep the evening watch of the house." 2 divisions you have are off duty on the Sabbath. For the sake of the king, they shall keep the evening watch of the house of the Lord. And you shall surround the king on all sides, every man with his weapons in his hand, and anyone penetrating their ranks. Let him be put to death. You shall be with the king in his going out and in his coming in. So the captains of the hundreds did according to all the wise Jehoiada commanded. Each of them took his men, those to be on duty on the Sabbath, and those going off duty on the Sabbath, and came to Jehoiada the priest. So the priest gave the captains of hundreds the swords the swords and spears of King David, those kept in the house of the Lord. Then the guards stood, every man with his weapons in his hand, from the right corner of the house to the corner of the house left of the altar, and round about the house of the king. And he brought out the king's son, put the crown on him, and gave him the testimony. They thereby announced him king and anointed him. Then they clapped their hands and said, "Long live the king." For that last part of the death of Judah, and in the period that Jehu reigned over Israel and Samaria was 28 years, just in case you couldn't hear it. That's after then Jehoshaphat, his son, ruled in his place, and the period that Jehu reigned over Israel and Samaria was 28 years. Queen Athaliah dies. Athaliah heard the noise of the people running, and she went to the people in the temple of the Lord. When she looked, there was a king standing by a pillar according to decree. And the singers and the trumpeters were by the king. All the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. So Athaliah tore her clothes and cried out, "Treason, treason!" So Jehoiada the priest commanded the captains of the hundreds and of the officers of the army and said to them, "Lead her out to the field under guard and slay her with the sword. And whoever follows her, for the priest had said, do not let her be killed. In the house of the Lord, they laid their hands upon her and went by the way of the horse. They went just read that one over again. Queen Athaliah dies. Queen Athaliah dies. Athaliah heard the noise of the people running, and she went to the people in the temple. You know what? One more time. Queen Athaliah dies. Athaliah heard the noise of the people running, and she went to the people in the temple of the Lord. When she looked, there was a king standing by the pillar according to decree, and the singers and the trumpeters were by the king. All the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. So Athaliah tore her clothes and cried out, "Treason, treason!" So Jehoiada the priest commanded the captains of the hundreds and the officers of the army and said to them, "Lead her out to the field under guard and slay her with the sword, and whoever follows her." For the priest had said, "Do not let her be killed in the house of the Lord." They laid their hands upon her and went by the way of the king, and went by the way of the horse entrance to the house of the king. She died there. The reforms of Jehoiada. Jehoiada the priest made a covenant between the Lord, the king, and the people, that they would remain the Lord's people. He also made one between the king and the people. Then all the people of the land went to the house of Baal, and they completely tore it down and broke it all to pieces, its altars and its images. And before the altars they killed Mattan, the priest of Baal. The priest then placed overseers. The priest then placed overseers over the house of the Lord. Then he took the captains of hundreds, Kori and Resem, and all the people of the land, and he led the king from out of the house of the Lord. They went by the way of the gate of the guardhouse to the king's house, and they sat him on the throne of the kings. So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was at peace. And in the house of the king, they killed Athaliah with the sword. Joash is king of Judah. Joash is king of Judah. Joash was 7 years old when he began to reign. He began his reign in the 7th year of Jehu, and he ruled for 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Ziba of Beersheba. And all the days in which Jehoiada the priest enlightened him, Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. However, none of the high places were removed, and the people still sacrificed and buried incense on the high places. Repairs of the temple. And Joash said to the priests, with regard to all the silver arising from the things consecrated, the silver offerings of the house of the Lord, the valuation of the silver assessed for each man, all the silver which comes from the heart of the man, who brings it into the house of the Lord. Let the priests take for themselves, each man, from silver that comes in, but they must maintain the repairs of the temple, whenever and whatever repairs are needed. Now it came to be that by the 23rd year of King Joash, the priests had not maintained the repair of the temple. So King Joash called Jehoiada the priest and the other priests and said to them, "Why have you not repaired and maintained the temple? Now take the silver from the treasury and use it to repair and maintain the temple." So the priests, all with one voice, agreed they would not receive any more silver from the people until they had made all repairs to the temple. Then Jehoiada, the priest, took a chest, bored a hole in its lid, and placed it on the right side of the altar in the house of the Lord. Then the priests who kept the weights put in the chest all the money found in the house of the Lord. And it came to be that whenever they noticed a large amount of silver in the chest, the king's scribe and the high priest put it in bags and weighed the silver found that day in the house of the Lord. Then they gave the silver apportioned for repairs into the hands of those who did the work, who had the oversight of the house of the Lord, to the carpenters and the builders who worked on the house of the Lord, to the masons, to the hewers of stone, to the buyers of wood, to make all repairs to the house of the Lord, and for all things discharged to maintain the house of the Lord. However, silver doors, nails, bowls, and trumpets, any vessel of gold or vessel of silver were not to be made from any of the silver brought into the house of the Lord. For this was given to the workmen who repaired the house of the Lord with it. For they did not require the account from the men into whose hands they delivered the silver, for the workmen dealt faithfully. Money for a sin offering, and money for a trespass offering, and money brought into the house of the Lord went to the priests. In those days, Hazael, king of Syria, went up to wage war against Gath, and they captured it. Then Hazael set his face to war against Jerusalem. So Joash, king of Judah, took all the sacred things dedicated by his fathers, Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and Ahaziah, kings of Judah, his own sacred things, all the gold found in the treasuries of the house of the Lord and in the king's house, and sent them unto Hazael, king of Syria. Then Hazael went away from Jerusalem. Now, the rest of the acts of Joash and everything he did, are these not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And his servants rose up and formed a conspiracy and killed Joash in the house of Milio and Silia. For Josachar, the son of Shimeath, and Jehozabad, the son of Shomer, his servants, struck him, and he died. And they buried him with his fathers in the city of David. Then Amaziah, his son, reigned in his place. Notes from the previous page. 11:1 through 20. Jehoshaphat hides young Joash in the house of the Lord until he can take his place as the leader of his people. So too, Miriam hid Moses, Exodus 2:3. Rahab hid the spies, Joshua 2:4. And Joseph and Mary hid the Christ child in Egypt, Matthew 2:13, until the proper time. 12:2 and 3. While under the guidance of the priest Jehoiada, who made a covenant with the Lord, 11:17, Joash did what was right before God, and though persuaded not to remove the high places, he did order the repair of the house of the Lord, and did so with trust and honor. Matthew 24:45.